Scientists working in Antarctica may have discovered what looks like a sealed doorway hidden in the ice. The entrance had been completely buried under packed snow and frozen layers of wind-blown ice, possibly untouched for more than a century. When researchers carefully cleared the ice and managed to open the door, they stepped into a space that had not been disturbed for generations. Inside were shelves, tools, and supplies left exactly where someone had placed them more than 100 years ago. For a moment, it looked less like an archaeological discovery, and more like someone had simply walked out of the room and never returned. But the explanation behind this frozen door in the ice is actually connected to one of the most fascinating periods in the history of exploration. More than a century ago, some of the first explorers to reach Antarctica built small wooden shelters along the frozen coastline. These huts were simple survival bases, packed with food, equipment, and scientific instruments. Many of them were abandoned when expeditions ended, and over time, powerful Antarctic storms slowly buried the structures under layers of snow. For decades, some of these huts became almost completely hidden beneath the ice. Recently, researchers working to preserve historic expedition sites uncovered one of these buildings that had been sealed by snow and ice for more than 120 years. The entrance had been packed shut by decades of drifting snow that froze into solid layers during Antarctic winters. When scientists finally cleared the doorway and opened it, they stepped into a room that had essentially been frozen in time since the early 1900s. What they found inside looked less like a ruin and more like a remarkably preserved time capsule. To understand why this discovery is so unusual, it helps to look at the environment in Antarctica. The continent is the coldest place on Earth, with winter temperatures that can fall below 60 degrees Celsius in some regions. The air is extremely dry, and in many places almost no bacteria or insects exist that normally break down organic materials. Because of this environment, objects left behind in Antarctica can remain preserved for incredibly long periods of time. Wood, leather, fabric, and even food can survive for decades or centuries if they remain frozen and undisturbed. The hut scientists reopened was originally built during the early era of Antarctic exploration, a period often called the heroic age of Antarctic exploration, which lasted roughly from 1897 to 1922. During those years, several famous expeditions attempted to explore the continent and reach the South Pole. Many of these expeditions relied on small prefabricated huts as winter bases. Ships would deliver the structures to Antarctica, crews would assemble them near the coast, and the teams would live there while carrying out exploration journeys across the ice. The buildings were stocked with everything explorers might need to survive months of isolation. When researchers stepped inside the newly opened structure, they found shelves still lined with supplies left behind more than 120 years ago. Wooden crates filled with food tins were stacked against the walls. Old tools were still lying on workbenches. Glass bottles and cooking equipment remained where the expedition members had once placed them. Some objects looked as if they had been used only yesterday. Food tins still contained preserved meat and biscuits that explorers relied on during the long polar winters. Early kerosene containers used for lamps and heating were still sealed. Researchers also found clothing items such as wool gloves, leather boots, and heavy expedition coats hanging from wooden hooks. These objects give historians a detailed look at how the earliest Antarctic explorers survived in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Life during those expeditions was extremely difficult. Crews often spent 9 months or more completely cut off from the outside world while their ships waited offshore or returned north for the winter. Temperatures could drop far below freezing, and storms sometimes lasted for days. The huts were designed to protect explorers from these conditions. Thick wooden walls helped trap heat from small coal or kerosene stoves. Windows were kept small to reduce heat loss, and supplies had to be stored carefully because resupply was impossible during the Antarctic winter. Inside the hut, researchers also discovered early scientific instruments used by expedition teams. During the heroic age, scientists in Antarctica collected data on weather patterns, magnetism, ocean currents, and glacial movement. Instruments used for these measurements were often simple but extremely important for building the first scientific understanding of the continent. Finding these tools still inside the hut helps historians reconstruct how early scientific research in Antarctica was conducted. Another surprising discovery involved biological traces inside the structure. Even in Antarctica, certain microorganisms can survive in extremely cold environments. Dust samples and surfaces inside the hut contained traces of microbes that may have been isolated for decades. Studying these organisms may help scientists understand how life survives in extreme cold and dryness. These microbes are known as extremophiles, organisms capable of living in conditions most life forms cannot tolerate. Researchers are especially interested in extremophiles because similar conditions may exist elsewhere in the solar system. Studying microbes that survive in Antarctica can provide clues about how life might exist on Mars or beneath the icy surfaces of moons like Europa or Enceladus. The hut also revealed many small details about daily life for the explorers who once lived there. Cooking utensils were still sitting near a preparation area. Boxes of biscuits were stacked beside preserved meat tins that formed a major part of the expedition diet. Early photographic equipment used to document the journey was also found among the stored supplies. These objects help historians imagine what daily routines looked like inside the hut. After long journeys across the ice using sleds and dog teams, explorers would return to shelters like this to repair equipment, cook meals, and plan the next stage of their expeditions. Some of the most important journeys in Antarctic exploration history began from huts just like this one. But discoveries like this are extremely fragile. Even though Antarctica preserves objects remarkably well, exposure to warmer air and human activity can slowly begin the process of decay. For that reason, conservation teams working at these sites move very carefully. Most items are documented and photographed exactly where they are found. In many cases, the objects are left inside the huts, so the sites remain as close as possible to their original state. Today, several of these early expedition huts are protected as historic monuments under international Antarctic agreements. And scientists believe there may still be other buried structures waiting beneath the Antarctic snow. Over the past century, shifting snow and drifting ice have gradually buried parts of old expedition sites. Some buildings are now hidden beneath several meters of snow. As new surveys and satellite mapping improve our understanding of the Antarctic landscape, researchers occasionally rediscover structures that had effectively vanished from view. Each rediscovered hut offers a rare opportunity to step directly into the past. Opening a door sealed by more than a century of Antarctic winters does not reveal treasure in the usual sense, but it does reveal something just as valuable: a perfectly preserved record of one of the most challenging periods in the history of exploration. Inside these frozen shelters, the tools, supplies, and personal belongings of the earliest Antarctic explorers remain exactly where they were left.
The South Pole is more than penguins and endless snow. There's a hidden ghost world within it. Look, it's right here on the globe. Don't confuse Antarctica with the Arctic, which is at the top of our maps. Much smaller in size, and, let's face it, way less mysterious. The ice sheet covering Antarctica is about 1 to 3 miles thick, which is up to 16 Eiffel Towers stacked on each other. This massive blanket hides the true features and contours of Antarctica's land. We still don't know much about this mysterious continent, and it is ice and snow that are to blame. We still don't even know the true shape and size of this continent. Mapping Antarctica without some huge shovels is an incredibly hard task. But satellites learned to penetrate the ice with their cameras. And now we know there's actually an enormous, dramatic ancient landscape beneath the snow. The ghost of the past. About 90 million years ago, Antarctica was a much warmer place. It was actually a lush rainforest with tons of plants and probably teeming with life. It even had rivers flowing through it. Then the ice came. This happened about 34 million years ago, during the transition from the Eocene to the Oligocene, when our planet cooled significantly. It was the beginning of one of our several ice ages. The land remained, but now was hidden under ice and snow that got thicker and thicker. To a regular eye, Antarctica turned into a white desert, vast, flat, and featureless. Time went on. This massive ice sheet moved around, smoothing and shifting the ground beneath it. Over the millions of years, it changed what the land looked like. Now, if we looked under the ice, it wouldn't hold any signs of the original South Pole, except for one place. In areas where the ice is especially thick and doesn't move much, like in East Antarctica, it has actually worked the other way around. It became like a super thick blanket that protects the land. Normally, things like wind or rain slowly wear away the ground over time, changing its shape. But since we have this protective ice blanket, it prevents these natural processes from reaching the stuff underneath. So, the ground stayed almost the same for millions of years, like it's been frozen in time. This special area near the Aurora and Schmidt subglacial basins has become the ghost of Antarctica's landscape. This place was barely touched even since it was first covered in snow 34 million years ago. This is a historical footprint, a place that can tell us what Antarctica's ground looked like before it became a freezing nightmare. As scientists peered under East Antarctica, they saw an amazing ghost. The traces of the rivers that were flowing there millions of years ago, various valleys, and some weird little islands, as well as 3 big chunks of land shaped like the letter U. Hey, what's that all about? You see, the continents on our planet are moving constantly, sliding along the red-hot lava mantle like cereal on milk. Over history, they came together and broke apart several times. Hundreds of millions of years ago, several continents were a part of one enormous Gondwana. Antarctica was one of them. It used to be one huge landmass. But when Gondwana broke apart, the poor continent got stretched by tectonic forces. Parts of land were pulled away from each other. Whoosh! And they got torn apart. And that's how we got these big chunks or blocks of land under thick layers of ice. In any case, scientists now want to explore this ghost a bit more. But to study it deeply, they need to actually drill down through the ice, like using a straw to get to the bottom of a thick shake. This will help them pick up some rocks and dirt from way below to learn more about the Earth's history and climate. Antarctica is the 5th largest continent in the world, approximately bigger than the entirety of Europe or Australia, competing with the entire South America in size. Aside from East Antarctica, we discussed there are several more regions: Antarctica Peninsula, South Pole, West Antarctica, and the Ross Sea. The continent is basically a frozen sandbox, and all its hidden, mysterious landscape is actually less explored than Mars's terrain. We only know for sure that without ice, it wouldn't just be flat and empty, but an entire world full of big mountains, huge canyons, and even fiery volcanoes. Some of these volcanoes are so huge that they peak above the layers of snow. In West Antarctica alone, there are at least 138 volcanoes, though only about 8 or 9 are active today. One of the craziest ones is Mount Erebus, the southernmost volcano and the tallest one on the continent, about 12,500 feet high. And deep beneath the ice sheet, this guy hosts incredible, beautiful subvolcanic caves. The temperatures there are warm enough for t-shirts. The Antarctic Peninsula, or Lesser Antarctica, looks like a bunch of mountainous islands deeply underground. It has newer volcanic rocks that are part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is like a giant circle of volcanoes and earthquake zones around the Pacific Ocean. The Greater Antarctica is a huge part, almost as big as Australia. It consists of East Antarctica and the South Pole. Beneath the ice, it's a place of rocks that have been around for a very, very long time, including the special zone we mentioned. You probably know that Antarctica is nearly devoid of humans. No wonder, with a mean temperature of about -46 degrees Fahrenheit. But even though this place is horrifyingly cold and deserted, life still clings on. You guessed it, in the underworld. In 2017, scientists found DNA traces of algae, moss, and even possibly unknown small animals in the deep caves. That means that even in such crazy conditions, there are still unique ecosystems thriving in little isolated warm pockets beneath the snow. There was another incredible find beneath Antarctica's Ross Ice Shelf, a lively ecosystem vibing within an underground river. Scientists have long suspected that Antarctica's underworld should have some freshwater lakes and rivers. One day, a satellite spotted a groove there. They decided to explore it and used a hot water drill to melt their way through the ice. As they reached the underworld, they dropped a camera into one of those hidden fresh rivers. And at first, they thought they'd find just some rocks or something. But instead, they stumbled upon hundreds of amphipods, tiny shrimp-like creatures. Little ones instantly swarmed around the lens. Shrimps blocked the camera and scientists couldn't check out what they wanted to. Pretty funny, but at least that means that there really is an important ecosystem deep within Antarctica. Now, they're gonna explore it. And all this is just the beginning of the mysterious underworld. Antarctica's snow also hides the deepest canyon on Earth under the Denman Glacier. Well, Mariana Trench is still the deepest point on Earth, but it's a part of the oceanic crust, geologically speaking. Also, in 1958, explorers found a huge mountain range under the ice, as big and tall as the famous Alps Mountains. The range stretched for about 745 miles with peaks as high as 1.7 miles. And all this magnificence is buried under tons of ice. Who knows what else we might find there? Antarctica holds about 60% of our entire planet's freshwater, which means it would be pretty bad if it melted. For example, there's this Doomsday Glacier, officially known as Thwaites Glacier. It's a huge ice formation, about the size of Florida, and it's melting right now. Every year, the sea levels rise by 4% because of it. If this guy melts away completely, the sea levels all around the world will increase by 2 feet, which might not sound like a lot, but it would be catastrophic for coastal areas. Luckily, researchers have found that even if its ice shelf were to collapse in the next 50 years, the glacier itself wouldn't retreat as quickly as they feared. It's still losing ice rapidly, but it would be quite a slow process. Scientists punched through more than 1,600 feet of ice and finally solved the billion-year-old Antarctica's magnetic mystery. Their find also completely changes our understanding of how continents collided and merged around the same time. But first things first. Several decades ago, scientists were running geophysical surveys in Antarctica and noticed stripes of magnetic highs and lows, areas where the crust magnetizes differently than everything around it. Nobody could figure out the cause. Researchers started mapping those magnetic anomalies in the early 1960s. Back then, they used airborne magnetic surveys that flew lines across the ice to detect unusual magnetic signals. They linked those magnetic anomalies to volcanic rocks hidden beneath the ice sheet. By the mid-1990s, international scientists launched an entire project to map Antarctica's magnetic anomalies across the entire continent. They put together millions of miles of magnetic survey data from airborne lines, sea, and even observations from space, and managed to produce the first continent-wide magnetic anomaly maps by the end of the 1990s. Those maps show how Antarctica's crust formed and changed through time. So they knew what was going on there, but couldn't explain why it happened like that. To get answers, researchers from St. Petersburg State University teamed up with scientists around the world to study one of the hardest places to work on the planet. Antarctica sits smack on the coldest winds on Earth, with ice sheets of about 1.5 miles thick on average. And that ice doesn't just sit there. Over millions of years, it grinds rock, buries valleys, and hides everything beneath its fractured frozen blanket. To reach the ancient bedrock that held the magnetic mystery, researchers had to drill over 1,700 feet of ice before they could even pull up samples from the underlying crust. When they brought those rock samples back to the lab, they turned out to be pieces of ancient volcanic island arc. There were entire chains of volcanoes that formed above subduction zones, similar to the Aleutian Islands in Alaska or the island arcs near Japan. In the lab, scientists looked at chemistry, measured magnetic minerals under microscopes, and used radiometric dating. This method reads the decay of unstable atoms to figure out the age of an object. And all this helped them determine that these rocks had a completely different origin than typical Antarctic crust. The team found that this volcanic island arc didn't just drift nearby. It collided with East Antarctica when the supercontinent Rodinia was in the forming stage. Rodinia gathered nearly all of Earth's landmasses into one colossal formation, and when that volcanic arc crashed into East Antarctica, it welded into place like two tectonic puzzle pieces, locking together. That collision left behind a distinctive magnetic signature, one that satellites can still detect today. The way these rocks recorded magnetism makes perfect sense once you understand a little bit about magnetic minerals. When molten rock cools, iron-rich minerals like magnetite align themselves with Earth's magnetic field, pretty much like tiny compass needles freezing in place. Over geological time, these locked-in magnetic directions act like memory sticks. When scientists studied the Antarctic samples, they found magnetic directions that didn't line up with ancient Antarctica's old magnetic field, but did line up with where that volcanic arc would have been long ago. That magnetic memory showed that the rocks didn't grow in place, but traveled and slammed into Antarctica. Alongside magnetic clues, scientists also compared gravity measurements from satellites and ground surveys, and found even more evidence that the rocks beneath East Antarctica weren't ordinary. Some regions of Antarctica have slightly weaker or stronger gravity depending on the density of rocks buried beneath the ice. Denser rock, like ancient volcanic crust, produces a slightly stronger gravitational pull. If you picture lying on a mattress, the way it dips over a bowling ball differs from where there's only foam. That's how gravity variations tell scientists something unusual lurks below. Those gravity patterns matched where the weird magnetic rocks were coming from. It only backed up the idea of an exotic chunk of crust attached to Antarctica's edge. And these findings show us that Rodinia's formation wasn't tidy or orderly. Bits of crust from far-off places got plastered onto Antarctica's edge and became clues that waited 1 billion years for scientists to dig them up. Over time, heat, pressure, and tectonic forces buried and reshaped those rocks, but their magnetic fingerprints survived. Another Antarctic mystery scientists recently solved is the secret of Blood Falls. Yep, as the name suggests, it's blood-red water pouring out of a glacier, and no one could explain what gives it its color. Back in September 2018, a camera captured the falls suddenly coming alive. At almost the same moment, instruments sitting on top of the glacier recorded something odd. The ice surface actually dropped slightly. The glacier sank, the red water flowed, and then the ice slowly lifted back up again weeks later. So beneath all that heavy ice, there is salty water locked away for ages. The glacier presses down constantly, squeezing that hidden water harder and harder. When the pressure builds too much, the ice shifts, opens somewhere deep below, and the trapped liquid rushes out in a sudden pulse. Blood Falls acts like a pressure valve for the glacier. Salt turns the water into a thick brine that refuses to freeze, even in Antarctica's brutal cold.
Over thousands, maybe millions of years, freezing concentrated the salt more and more. It left behind a liquid that can still move through solid ice. Scientists believe minerals from buried rocks feed that salty mix and give us clues about what lies far below the glacier. The red color makes the whole scene look dramatic, but the explanation for it is surprisingly simple. Underground, the water carries dissolved iron. The moment that liquid touches air, the iron reacts with oxygen and turns rust red, just like metal left out in the rain. Within minutes, bright crimson stains spread across the white ice. Cameras near the falls showed fresh red staining spreading day by day. At the same time, temperature sensors deep in the lake where it flows recorded sudden cooling. Dense brine had slipped into the lake underwater and disturbed layers that normally stay perfectly stable. Even small disruptions matter here, since life survives in narrow zones where nutrients barely exist. As the drainage continued, scientists noticed the glacier slowed down too. With less water acting as lubrication underneath, the ice pressed harder against the rock below and moved forward more slowly. All this means that hidden water controls how fast entire glaciers slide across Antarctica. Some observations from the air also showed salty groundwater pathways stretching miles beneath the valley floor. The brine doesn't just sit under the glacier, but travels through rock and ice before finally escaping at Blood Falls. And deep inside that dark, oxygen-free water, there's life. Microbes live off iron and sulfur instead of oxygen and thrive in total darkness for millions of years. This ancient liquid may have stayed sealed beneath the ice long before humans even existed. Lake Enigma is another cool discovery from Antarctica with a twist. For a long time, researchers thought it was completely frozen solid. But during one expedition, they found that under the thick ice, there was a layer of liquid water about 40 feet deep. To learn more, they drilled through the ice and sent down a camera to explore what was hiding in the lake's depths. The lake's water, which they think comes from the nearby amorphous glacier, through a secret underground pathway, was filled with strange microbial life. These tiny microbes lived in mats that covered the lake bed. Some of the mats were thin and spiky, and others looked like crumpled carpets or even small tree-like shapes that grew up to 16 inches. Many of the microbes could make their own food through photosynthesis, just like plants do, and gave the lake a high amount of oxygen. One of the coolest discoveries was a type of microbe which usually lives in low oxygen places. Lake Enigma might be similar to environments on icy moons like Europa or Enceladus. So it could mean that these moons also have hidden water under their ice and possibly microbial life too. Welcome to one of the most mysterious and unexplored places on Earth. But what's so special about that? It's just some icy peaks and the endless snowy expanse of Antarctica. Yeah, that's right, but there's still a planetary scale mystery here. No matter how hard you try, you won't see a hidden mountain range, giant, unexplored land where no human has ever set foot, and it lies under another layer of mountains. It's like a nesting doll, but the size of a continent. These mountains hide Antarctica secrets, and these secrets can tell us something awesome about the ancient history of our planet. This gigantic unexplored territory in Antarctica is called the Gamburtsev Subglacial Mountains. And the layer of ice above keeps this place untouched by nature and people. It's like a land inside another land, and it hides more than just mountains. There are valleys, hills, and plains. The whole area is similar to the European Alps, but unfortunately, we can't enjoy the view. Those mountains were first discovered in 1958 using seismological instruments. More than half a century has passed since then, and this place still remains one of the most poorly studied tectonic objects on Earth. Why? Because it's ice. A lot of ice. Who knows? Maybe there are some unknown ancient artifacts lying there. What if they're hiding a secret city or spaceships? It's unlikely, of course, but it would still be interesting to look there. Think about it. Hundreds or even thousands of miles of land that have remained unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. Even if no new species of animals or remains of an ancient civilization are there, this place still has a history. The history of the formation of continents on our planet. And scientists have already figured out some of this story. The mountains buried in Antarctica were originally like ordinary mountains, but as a result of a planetary scale event, they just… Wait a minute. Have you ever wondered how mountain ranges are formed? We see them in real life, in movies, in photos on the internet. We climb them. But how did they appear? Mountains have not always existed on the planet in this form. They appeared as a result of a large-scale collision of tectonic plates. Two giant solid chunks of ground are moving toward each other, then crash, and boom! Millions of tons of the Earth's crust pile on top of each other, mix, and form ledges and gorges. And all this can last for millions of years. Yes, it's a disaster, but it's very slow. Some tectonic plates are still colliding. For example, the Himalayas continue to grow because the Indian and Eurasian plates are still ramming into each other. And this process began about 50 million years ago. The Gamburtsev Mountains under ice experienced a similar event, only much earlier. An article in the journal Earth and Planetary Science Letters says that they appeared during the formation of the supercontinent Gondwana. Two giant pieces of land were separated by a boundless ocean. But then, about 700 million years ago, they collided and formed Gondwana. This supercontinent included the territories of modern Africa, South America, Australia, India, and Antarctica. The giant pieces crashed into each other and released a stream of hot, partially molten rock. This mess grew bigger and bigger, forming mountains. The temperature of those mountains grew, their mass increased, and at some point, Gondwana became unstable. The supercontinent began to collapse under its own weight. The hot rocks below the surface began to flow sideways as a result of a process called gravitational spreading. Take toothpaste and start squeezing it out of the tube. Approximately the same thing happened with billions of tons of red-hot rock. Ancient mountains in Antarctica appeared right during this catastrophic event. You've just watched a visual simulation of global events that took place hundreds of millions of years ago. It looks cool, but how did scientists figure it out? How did they see this planetary scale destruction? If the Gamburtsev Mountains under ice is one of the most unexplored places in the world, then how could people find out its origin? The answer is simple. Tiny particles of rock have told us about the changing landscape of the planet. These are zircons, but scientists also call them time capsules. This mineral is very handy and resistant to mechanical and chemical influences. It's difficult to crush, it doesn't get affected by erosion, and it doesn't dissolve in water. And there's uranium inside it. This chemical element shows scientists the age of the rock. The fact is that uranium always decays into lead at the same rate. Scientists look at the ratio of uranium and lead and determine the age of minerals with great accuracy. Okay, this sounds a bit complicated. Here's a simple example. Imagine that each mountain belt is a clock that starts ticking at the moment of its formation. That is, after the collision of tectonic plates. After the rock forms, uranium begins its slow decay. The more time passes, the more uranium turns into lead. The rate of this decay is always the same. This decay can last for billions of years. The less uranium is in zircons and the more lead, the older the rock is. And this is how it happens in practice. Geologists take several rock samples. In a lab, they crush it to extract crystalline zircons. Geologists then dissolve the particles in acid to separate uranium from lead. Then they use a special device, a mass spectrometer that accelerates atoms and sorts them by mass. This is a rather complicated process, but the bottom line is that this device shows scientists the amount of uranium and lead. They look at the ratios of these two elements and calculate the age of the rock. Geologists took zircons from sandstones near the Gamburtsev Mountains, studied those particles, looked at the level of uranium, and calculated the chronology of mountain formation. Then they compared the data obtained with the history of our planet and realized that the mountains buried in Antarctica appeared during the formation of the supercontinent Gondwana. But how did they find out that the supercontinent included Australia, India, and Africa? Zirconia from those Antarctic rocks turned out to be very similar to zirconium from those countries. That is, a long time ago, these three continents were together. So, the Gamburtsev Mountains began to grow about 650 million years ago. About 580 million years ago, they reached the height of the Himalayas, and 80 million years later, they experienced the melting of the Earth's crust. And while most of the mountain ranges on the planet were changing and collapsing, the Gamburtsev Mountains under ice remained untouched. Water, soil, wind, earthquakes, gravity, and other natural forces destroy mountain belts. This process is called erosion. But mountains buried in Antarctica haven't experienced anything like this. The cold temperature and the ice sheet around them kept this range unchanged. It's one of the best preserved ancient mountain belts on the planet. Okay, but why do we need to explore these mountains? What difference does it make that the supercontinent Gondwana collapsed in the past? It's possible that plants, frozen bodies of insects, or ancient bacteria have remained preserved under thick layers of ice. What about ancient animals? Many species could have lived on Gondwana. Studying ancient mountains in Antarctica can show us what the planet looked like about 500 million years ago. When Antarctica was a green continent, what lived on it? What happened to this life? Is it possible to revive those ancient creatures after so many years? If scientists were able to calculate the date of the supercontinent's appearance using tiny particles, then imagine what they could find after examining this hidden mountain range. It all sounds very interesting. But there's one problem. To take a small piece of this unknown world, you need to drill through a lot of ice. You need to deliver heavy equipment to one of the most inaccessible continents in the world, build stations, obtain an energy source, and conduct large-scale research. It sounds incredibly expensive, so this hidden territory will probably remain a mystery for a long time. Let's just hope that some billionaire will want to find out Antarctica's secrets and arrange a large-scale expedition there.
Ooh, mysterious mountain ranges hidden under thousands of tons of ice. Bizarre, transparent creatures with see-through skin, singing snow plains. Antarctica has its own terrifying secrets. And now, a mysterious ice hole the size of Switzerland that keeps popping open. And scientists have finally figured out why. This hole, called the Maud Rise Polynyas, was first spotted in 1974 and 1976 in the Weddell Sea. Since then, it's been kind of playing hard to get. Sometimes it appears, sometimes it disappears for years. And when it does show up, it mysteriously changes size. For decades, researchers were trying to figure out what makes it form. Then, in 2016 and 2017, the Polynyas went absolutely massive, more than 30,000 square miles. The hole stuck around for several weeks during winters. It was the first time since the 1970s that the Weddell Sea had such a huge, long-lasting Polynyas. Here's the deal with Antarctic sea ice. In summer, the ice is at its smallest, around 1 million square miles. Yeah, that's considered small. By winter, it spreads to a whopping 7 million square miles, covering about 4% of Earth's surface in weird white tiles. Most of this ice grows during the weeks-long polar night on the floating ice shelves around the continent. These holes in the ice, called Polynyas, usually form when strong winds from inland push the ice tiles apart. That same cold wind also freezes more seawater inside the hole, adding extra chunks to the ice sheet. But the Maud Rise Polynyas isn't near the coast, where those winds normally help make holes. Out in the open ocean, holes like this are rare. Add in the fact that ice across the Southern Ocean has been shrinking. No wonder scientists are left bewildered. What exact conditions are creating this stubborn giant ice hole? To crack the mystery, the scientists dove into a mountain of data – satellites, floating sensors, even info from tagged marine animals. Plus, they had years of past observations from other researchers. And they found something unusual. In 2016 and 2017, the Weddell Sea's circular ocean current, called the Weddell Gyre, was stronger than usual. That extra punch made it easier for salty, warmer water from deep below to reach the surface. The Maud Rise Polynyas sits above an underwater mountain called Maud Rise. During those big Polynyas years, the stronger current caused salt to gather around this submerged peak. On the surface, the wind whipped over the ice, creating a corkscrew effect. It literally pulled that salty water up from below. The extra salt lowered the freezing point of the surface water, allowing the Maud Rise Polynyas to form and stick around. Polynyas are really important for the planet. The dense salty water formed in these holes can travel huge distances, spreading across the global ocean and affecting climates everywhere. But these magnificent holes aren't the only cool and mysterious phenomena Antarctica is famous for. How about underground lakes? Or shall I say under-ice lakes? Because there are entire lakes hidden under Antarctica's thick ice. Scientists first found them back in 1970 using radar, and now they think there are around 400 lakes tucked under around 2 miles of ice in the explored areas. These lakes likely formed after Antarctica broke off from Gondwanaland, the ancient supercontinent. Surprisingly, the water in the lakes doesn't freeze because the ice above presses down too hard. Hey, it's physics, bro! The biggest of them all is Lake Vostok, discovered in the 1990s. It sits a bit more than 2 miles below the ice. Scientists have drilled down to take samples, and the water they pulled up was about 26 degrees Fahrenheit, even though the lake had been trapped under ice for over 20 million years. There's also Lake Williams. In 2014, scientists made a lit discovery there. They found a thriving colony of microorganisms nearly a mile under the ice. Those tiny creatures never saw sunlight or fresh air. Instead, they used methane and ammonium as energy to grow. Another marvel hides in plain sight in the McMurdo Dry Valley. It's a waterfall that looks like something straight out of a horror movie. Bright crimson water, like blood gushing from a wound in the ice, pours down 5 stories from Taylor Glacier into Lake Bonny. Ooh, spooky. But there's actually a scientific reason behind it. The water that feeds Blood Falls used to be part of a salty lake. Now, it's completely cut off from the atmosphere because glaciers formed on top of it. Trapped more than 1,300 feet underground, the water has become super salty, 3 times saltier than seawater, and it can't freeze. This underground water is also packed with iron and completely lacks oxygen in sunlight. When it slowly seeps through a crack in the glacier and hits the open air, the iron oxidizes, basically rusts, and turns the water that eerie dark red. With such creepy landscapes, Antarctica might look like a frozen wasteland, freezing cold, almost no rain, and winds that could knock you off your feet. The coldest Earth's temperatures ever was recorded there, minus 128.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And still, Antarctica is actually home to some seriously bizarre wildlife. For the longest time, scientists thought nothing could survive under all that ice. Turns out, they were very wrong. There are all sorts of creatures that have adapted to the brutal environment. Tiny microbes, crustaceans, colossal squid, and spiders so big their legs could cover a dinner plate. Giant worms with shiny golden bristles and huge sharp-toothed jaws also lurk under the ice. And then there's the ice fish, a completely see-through fish with huge eyes and organs you can literally see through its skin. These fish have built-in antifreeze proteins to survive the freezing waters, and they can't live anywhere warmer. Even stranger, they don't have hemoglobin, the protein that makes our blood red. In other words, they survive without the stuff that literally keeps most animals alive. But Antarctica wasn't always the frozen desert we know today. Millions of years ago, before the Ice Age, it was actually warm, lush, and full of life, maybe even home to ancient civilizations. Hard to imagine, huh? Scientists figured this out after finding fossilized wood, tropical tree remains, and leaf impressions, all pointing to the existence of rainforests. On top of that, they've uncovered fossils of marine animals, birds, and dinosaurs from the Cretaceous period. Even tiny creatures left their mark. Fossilized beetle wings from 14 to 20 million years ago, single-cell fossils, and, astonishingly, 50-million-year-old sperm cells preserved in the egg case of an extinct worm. So now, it probably won't shock you when I tell you that beneath Antarctica's thick ice sheets, there's a massive hidden mountain range. The Gamburtsev Mountains stretch for 745 miles and rise to almost 10,000 feet, about the third the height of Mount Everest. And all this is buried under between 6,500 to 13,100 feet of ice. The mountains were discovered in 1958. Scientists noted a thin patch of ice and some weird gravity readings while crossing the continent. Even though no one has ever seen those mountains directly, researchers use radar to map their shape and gravitational and magnetic readings to study them all the way to their base. Perhaps the craziest part is that the Gamburtzes are around 1 billion years old. So, in theory, they should have eroded away long ago. How they're still standing is a mystery. Most scientists think a frozen mantle beneath the ice might be protecting them from erosion, keeping this ancient range intact. And finally, Antarctica has its own soundtrack. The Ross Ice Shelf, the continent's largest ice shelf, is several hundred feet thick and spreads over 193,000 square miles, roughly the size of France. And scientists have recently discovered that this massive ice slab actually sings. The eerie melody comes from wind blowing over snow dunes, which creates vibrations in the ice and a nearly continuous seismic hum. You can't hear it with your ears, but seismic sensors pick up the mournful tune. In fact, it was discovered by accident. Scientists just installed special sensors to monitor other ice behaviors. Now, even cooler, the song changes depending on what's happening on the ice. Melting, storms, and shifting snow all tweak the vibrations. Researchers are now using this haunting melody as a kind of early warning system. They listen to it in real time to track the ice shelf stability and potential collapse.